What's up, you freaks? We're here with the Starving Podcast. This podcast today is brought to you by GenoPalette, a genetic nutrition company that analyzes your genes. Ever wonder if you're carb sensitive or if you metabolize coffee well or alcohol well? Maybe you have a gluten allergy. Some of these genes will tell you what your nutritional profile should be. Okay, so check them out. We do believe that this is the future of customized nutrition. Speaking of customized nutrition, this podcast is also brought to you by Consistency Breeds Growth, a company that works with very high level athletes and also people looking to get fit and ripped for the summer. So if you're looking to improve your health, you're looking to improve your performance with a customized approach with a coach, please look to their website at consistencybreedsgrowth.com. Today, we're going to be talking about intermittent fasting. This is part 2 of the series. In the first podcast, I went over 48-hour fast and also intermittent fasting. So please check out that podcast if you haven't heard it yet. But today, we're going to go a little bit more into the science of why this might be something that you might apply to your lifestyle. So let's go ahead and get started. Hope you enjoy.
It's science.
Okay, the Starving Podcast. It's your host, Justin Jordan. What's up?
Hey, woo, woo, woo. You ready to do this thing today?
Yeah, man, it's going to be a good one. I want to really expound upon what we talked about last time. I did my human experiment where I did my own fasting for several weeks and actually was able to incorporate it into my lifestyle, which is cool.
Cool.
And I gave a lot of information to the listeners about what my experiences were, performance-wise, sleep-wise, sex drive, hunger, upon following this, what my body composition changes were. So if you haven't heard that, go back to part 1 of the intermittent fasting, where I am a guinea pig for this diet. So we not only looked into the literature, but I also tried it myself. And today we're going to go over a little bit more about some of the science behind this. We're going to try to keep it low key so that everyone can get a lot out of this podcast. But we do want to explain some of the benefits to this for people both in the performance side of things and also people that might have some underlying health issues going on, longevity, want to live forever.
Hell yeah.
We got some good info for you today.
Nice. All right, so I think the first thing we should get into, we'll talk briefly about, what the hell is intermittent fasting and piggyback that into time-restricted eating. But
Yep.
I think most of the reviews that Justin and I read for this, they always give a brief or sometimes lengthy explanation on your circadian rhythm. So I'll take this part away. I thought this was the most interesting and possibly the most informative part that I was reading because I frankly didn't know anything about it. So we're always talking about, you have your circadian rhythm. What's this? What's that? So in your body, actually in your brain, you have, I think it's in your hypothalamus. So somewhere deep in the center of your brain is what's actually your central clock. So that's the one big clock that's determining how the rest
master
of your
clock.
Yeah, your master clock. That's the that thing goes, you got some big problems. And so the circadian rhythm that people keep talking about there, so you have the earth rotates around the sun, you have your sun up and your sun down. And the part of your brain that's this master clock deals with, it's this light this light input coming in through your eyes, obviously, is what's helped keeping that internal clock going. Now, the other interesting thing I learned, too, about this was that the rest of the cells in your body have their own clock. And if you take nothing else away from this podcast, is that this idea behind intermittent fasting and time-restricted eating is the regulation or the dysregulation that we find in the modern, say, the American diet, or just being a person now in the modern age, is where the cells in your body are being fed by, you eating that donut at 11 o'clock at night, and your brain's trying to tell you, hey, let's shut this crap down, go to sleep. So those two arguments that your body is having, that's a whole big storm for metabolic conditions. So diabetes is the one that we saw pop up most often in the literature. and
Yeah.
probably something we'll talk about today. So, uh,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, that's awesome. So, yeah, essentially you have the master clock, which is the sun up and sundown. You have the metabolic clock, which is starts after your first meal. Okay, so your metabolism starts to process protein, carbs, and fat after that first meal of the day. And after that, it slowly, it slows down as the day prolongs. Okay, so if you can line up your master clock, which is sun up, sundown, with your metabolic clock, right? It's sort of like a synergistic approach to allowing your body to process food better. And actually, there are specific genes that are turned on for metabolic function when you're eating particular foods at certain times, right? And you want to have that consistency between your master clock and the metabolic clock. And that's really an important point. And just some things to behind the science of this. So if you look at melatonin, so melatonin, for example, is made from tryptophan. So tryptophan is a protein that you ingest from any type of meat source, or if you're vegan or vegetarian, another type of protein source, right? Tryptophan is one of those proteins. And after that's ingested, it actually gets synthesized into serotonin in the body, and then gets eventually synthesized into melatonin. And melatonin is a chemical compound in the body that actually inhibits, insulin secretion. And insulin is a hormone that helps process carbohydrates and blood glucose within the body. So when it's nighttime and melatonin is actually high because the sun is going down, your master clock is winding down, you don't want to be having a bunch of food, or especially carbohydrates, because melatonin, for all things considered, inhibits insulin secretion and timing. So if you want to have good regulated blood glucose levels, right, there is some evidence suggesting that you should stay away from carbohydrates late at night. And everyone's case is different. For our performance athletes, we don't typically do that because we need them getting in a specific amount of food in a day. But for other people that aren't going for performance but are going for longevity, health, long term, it may be better to eat your carbs either one around your workout window, or two more in the morning, where your metabolism and genes that are activated are in sync with your master clock, and you can actually process them better, since melatonin inhibits insulin.
Yeah, it's a great point what you made off about the nutrient timing. I read one review, and something I kept finding myself asking was, we're always talking about this pre-diabetic condition, or is my insulin secretion levels, are they all messed up? In this one review, Paoli et al. 2019 actually was able to show that a fair amount of basically, if you live in the U.S. and you have to ask yourself, hey, is my insulin secretion level all messed up? It probably is, because this idea of why can athletes eat these carbs after that larger training window? Is that because insulin is helping shuttle all those all those carbs to the cells, those gains we're always talking about. If you're sitting, pardon my French, if you're sitting on your ass and you're eating a bowl of pasta at night, insulin's primary source in the body is to take those and give you gains. And if you're not getting gains in the muscles, guess where else it's going. So
Yep.
yeah, that review was quite informative, and it showed too that you may not have a metabolic condition yet, but there's a quite there's a very large case to be made that if you're eating anything substantial at night and you're not exercising anytime during the day, then you're probably dysregulating your clock and putting on the pounds, just because your insulin is just being jacked all the time instead of giving your body a rest. So
Right. Yeah, and just to get into the metabolic disease sort of realm of the podcast, basically there are a lot of studies that have shown, one specifically where there are people on a high fat and high carb diet, and they eat during the day, and then in a parallel experiment, nighttime shift workers were given the same caloric intake of a high fat and high carb diet, and it was found that since they were able to eat throughout the entire night, and which is inconsistent with your master clock, that those nighttime shift workers essentially were more likely to develop metabolic disease associated with weight gain and increase in adipose tissue. Now, one question I had on this study was, are nighttime workers just like less active? Because when you get home, you're working all night, which is the same as someone's working during the day. But then when you get home, you're just like exhausted and don't want to do anything. So it's a possibility. But based off of the studies we have now, we do know that a caloric surplus for most people, and people that aren't eating within a particular time frame, may be at a higher risk for different types of metabolic disease.
Yeah, it's something they didn't cover too much at least in the reviews I was able to find. Whereas they did talk substantially about the shift workers, but they didn't cover the majority of what our other podcasts have talked about, is that what's the composition of your macronutrients, and they were able to show. They didn't say like they're eating donuts and butter or something, but they did say that just because of your own sort of the nature of shift working, it tends to be high stress. Your sleep is dysregulated, and if it has this whole cascade of effect. If you're stressed already and you're not sleeping well, your ghrelin goes through the roof, and not only are you craving food, but you're craving like that instant gratification food. You're not going to eat a salad. You're going to be like, hey, let's go down to the vending machine and just get whatever we can find.
Right.
And I think moving into how people are eating, Justin and I talked about the fact that we really don't realize how often and how much we eat throughout the day. So some of one of the tenets behind intermittent fasting is taking a break off from food. And there's a few different schemes I'll let Justin go into, but it's shocking when you think that, okay, I'm not going to be eating for 12 hours. Like, oh man, that's freaking me out. Yeah, but the other side of it is that you're actually eating for 12 hours, and there's a certain metabolic like cascade that your body goes through every time you start eating something, even if it's a snack. And snacking was covered substantially within the literature, strangely enough, as well as a meal too. So Justin, would you want to go into maybe the splits we'll call them, for intermittent fasting, or
Right. Yeah, I can go into them, definitely. It's just good to express. I talked to some of my family members who went home, and I'm like, you guys should, maybe it's just intermittent fasting is just an easy way to get people to be at a caloric restriction, which helps with as we know, a lot of human disease, because a lot of human disease are growth diseases or growth mechanistic diseases and pathways. So if you can get to a point to where you're at a caloric restriction via intermittent fasting, that's great. And I was speaking with some of them, and they were like, no, we don't eat until lunch anyways. It's fine. Like, I'm doing 16 hours fasted, which is, let's say you stop eating at 8 o'clock. It's the next day at 12, you can have another meal. Then I'm like, you have coffee in the morning? I'm like, yeah, I have coffee. Is it black? They're like, no, I put a little bit of cream. Boom. Your metabolic clock starts right there.
Yep.
It starts. And the problem is, what'll end up happening is some people that start the metabolic clock that early in the morning, and then they'll go throughout the day to eat lunch, and then when they get home to eat dinner at 7, 8, boom, they have that meal. Their metabolic clock thought that they were done eating for the day, and when they eat at 7 o'clock at night, they restarted the metabolic clock right before they go to sleep, which is when the master clock is winding down. So you have to be very diligent about, like, I think black coffee is okay in the mornings. It is a xenobiotic, and it does have to be metabolized by the liver. But overall, I think plain black coffee is okay to have in the morning.
Yeah.
I've
seen,
go ahead.
I've seen a few different things about it. It's one of those nebulous kind of hand waving deals. Generally speaking, and this is something we'll talk about, I don't know, maybe 15, 20 minutes. Depends what your goal is for the fast. If your fast is to like stop eating everything and give your whole metabolism a rest, then just drinking water is probably the best thing. If you're trying to, do intermittent fasting, say for weight loss or just getting your hormones in balance again, some coffee, assuming it's black, is not gonna kill you. I read I forget which study it was, or it might just have been some online stuff saying that the coffee will generate the oh god, what is it? One of the some of your stomach acid, and will start setting off the cascade of, you're putting it into your body. It has to be digested, but it's a substantially smaller response than if you said like, no, we're going to a diner, we're getting bacon and eggs right now. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and it's an important question because I get the question a lot about coffee because it is a staple in everyday life. And a lot of people that are doing intermittent fasting are fasting in the morning, right? They continue their fast throughout from the night into the morning. So that's why, it's getting brought up. And I think if you do have it, it's okay. But ideally, you would take in everything in your window where you're able to eat. And in regards to performance athletes, so essentially, after you've done, a fast overnight, right? It's a significant amount of hours, 8 to 10 hours, right? Your body starts to, go through a different pathway of food availability because you're not taking in any food. So what does it do? It goes to your fat, especially if your fat metabolism and fat oxidation is fairly sufficient. And what that does is it puts you in a temporary state of ketosis. So your body starts making ketone bodies. One of those ketones is BHB, all right, beta hydroxybutyrate. Beta hydroxybutyrate is generated in the morning and can actually be very useful, right, for performance athletes when they're doing aerobic-based training, monostructural-based training. So it helps with, improving, how mitochondria, which is the powerhouse of the cells, where you get all of your energy from when you're training, it helps improve the lipolysis and the use of fat by the mitochondria. So they're expressed much better when training fasted. So if you're doing monostructural work, you're likely better to, do that monostructural work in the morning before having any food. And then, which will also, training in the morning also helps improve fat metabolism. And later in the day, do your strength and harder metcons, whether you're, an Olympic weightlifting athlete or CrossFit athlete or MMA athlete, whatever it might be. This is how it structure your 2-a-day trainings, if that's what you're doing. And that's what we have a lot of our athletes doing. I know Dane Smith does this. In the mornings, he does a lot of his monostructural work, rowing and running and stuff like that in the morning, and then gets a later on session when he's not with his 2 new twins.
Wow, yeah, he's
Is
when they start running around, man, he's gonna get his cardio real quick.
exactly, yeah. So I want to go into a little bit about some of the hormones that are regulated throughout this. So a lot of the hormones that regulate human disease are grow hormones, so that promote growth within the body, such as cancer, diabetes. All of these sort of things are regulated by, a variety of hormones. So when you eat, you upregulate a lot of these hormones, like mTOR and IGF-1. IGF-1 is insulin growth insulin like growth factor 1, okay? And IGF-1, it's basically a hormone that's secreted when you have protein, carbohydrates, and it's basically a structure similar to insulin that gives anabolic effects and results. And by anabolic, I mean growth.
Gains.
So that's the growth of, gains. And it could be, not so good gains. It could be fat gains,
Yep.
right? It doesn't delineate between, unless you're timing everything appropriately, it's not delineating between building muscle or building fat. And this is why, the window of gains that we always talk about is likely hormone related. But basically, when this hormone is upregulated from food, right, your body's not able to clear out anything. It's not able to clear out damaged DNA, unfunctional mitochondria, autoimmune cells, dead cells. because when it gets to the, apoptosis, which is the death of cells, right? This is what's saving people from these grow mechanisms for human disease, right?
Hmm.
And what'll happen is when you're fasting, your body decides, all right, it's time to clear out all this garbage we don't need. But when your body has IGF-1, IGF-1's like, no, actually, I can heal this damaged cell. Don't worry about it. Watch out. And it tries to repair it, and it starts to repair these damaged cells. And this is how potentially cancer and a lot of other diseases are expressed in people. Okay, this is at least a hypothesis amongst the scientific literature currently. Or one of the concerted mechanisms of cancer and other types of diseases out there. So by fasting, you're down-regulating mTOR and IGF-1, okay? And this will allow for the clearance of a lot of these things that I just discussed.
Yeah, there's a really good podcast that Dr. Rhonda Patrick did on, I have my note here, October 30th of 2017, where they have somebody who is studying intermittent fasting and time restricted eating, Dr. Sachin Panda. I hope I'm saying it
Sachin
right.
Panda,
Sachin
yeah.
Panda, yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it's a really dense, it's a really great podcast. But that's something they talked about a lot was this clearing of cells through, from the body through your natural repair mechanisms. And that's just, I want to dovetail into a nice little tangent of mine. It'll take 2 seconds,
Do it.
but
Go for it.
I gotta take my shot. So when you're saying that like people are doing these like juice cleanses to like clear dead cells, don't like, they're just dead wrong. It's if you're putting food, if you're putting food in your body.
About this. It's hilarious.
Yeah, if you're putting food in your body and like, or it's like I'm doing a juice cleanse. Like, oh, okay, cool. Did you run a marathon today? So you need to be drinking 85 grams of fruit for the whole day. It's like, no, what you're doing is you're putting on fat tissue and you're not cleansing shit from your body. Nothing's gonna happen except, well, maybe your gut microbiome is going to change in response to all that damn sugar you're putting in there. But that's, yeah. So no, you actually want to clean your body out. Stop eating for 12 hours. Stop eating for 20 hours. There's a reason why, this cleansing effect, is practiced in many religions. Your body undergoes these processes and can function a lot. It will start eating itself, taking away that belly fat. Okay, tangent over. I'm done. Sorry, I had to do that.
No, I agree completely. And that's an important point because there's just so much stuff out there that people are promoting, and there's just zealots selling stuff, and it's not the correct information. So
Yeah.
let's get into Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's, and stuff like that. And the advancing age is a major risk factor for Alzheimer's disease and Parkinson's disease and stroke, and it's really the degeneration and death of neurons that occur in many of these disorders, and they create tau proteins and tangles, which causes brain deterioration. And fasting has been shown to combat some of these diseases, and there are some studies out there that show that rats actually on an ad libitum diet, which meaning they can eat whenever they want. Food is sort of left out for them versus, rats that are intermittent fasting. They were able to live twice as long. They basically become master splinter.
Yeah, which is spectacular. Yeah, there's
I mean, this is rats, and they have a higher metabolism. I think like the rats lose like 20% of their body weight if they fast for 24 hours. A human loses like 2 to 3%.
But it's close enough.
It's very different. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's that argument is one that Justin and I will probably have to shoot down. But it's if you're reading the scientific literature, we do tests on rats and mice. It's been like that for the last 200 years or so. Get used to it. We can't.
I mean, yeah. I mean, when you look, there are two reasons. One, rats have the same genotype, so like you can compare them directly better. So if you're doing crossover experiments or parallel experiments, it's easier than humans because we have different genes that we encode for, and our epigenetic profiles have changed, which is how your genes change based on your experiences, right? So that's one advantage of rats. And second, testing on rats also, you don't have the placebo effect
Yeah.
because they don't know what the hell's going on. So this is why this is why some of the studies with rats are actually applicable. So like when you see a rat study, don't just it's on rats. It's dumb. Like come on, like
They don't mind
it,
getting their blood taken 4 to 15 times a day either. Well, they probably mind, but if
yeah.
you ask a rat to, hey, give me some blood and stick to this diet, well, they're in a cage. They don't have too much to listen to. So
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
read the study. That's sort of point. Just to put one caveat in here about brain health and stuff like that. So the problem with this is insulin-like growth factor, which is the hormone we talked about before, that allows things in the body to grow. It also affects the brain, and it's very good for the brain because it's it's not only neuroprotective but neurogenesis is actually plays a major role from insulin-like growth factor, which is the generation of new neurons, nerve cells, and as we mentioned before, when you fast, insulin-like growth factor is decreased. So this is why you don't want to fast for prolonged periods of time all the time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like 24, 48 hours. Intermittent fasting, like fasting 16 hours until like 12 o'clock and then eating from 12 to 8 is okay. And in doing periodically 24 or 48-hour fast. If you're doing a 48-hour fast, I really would recommend speaking with your doctor ahead of time because we're not medical professionals. But for 24 hours, if you're doing something like that, you don't want to do it too often because insulin-like growth factor is very important for the neural development and neurogenesis of different nerve cells in the brain, which is actually good for Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, and other neurological diseases out there.
Yeah, your brain is a giant piece of fat that runs on carbs, and it needs them. But the idea that some of the studies we're reading discuss too is it just doesn't need this constant barrage of high glycemic index carbs to spike your insulin level, and it goes
Right.
up and it goes down. And again, this is something Jess and I we will always bring back into the discussion is food choices. You can eat fruit, have the fiber, it won't take as much, the sugar won't hit you as hard. I'm reading a book now, we'll talk about it in maybe a month or two, hopefully when I finish it, but that the standard American diet with this white flour, these high GI carbs, part of the reason why they're terrible for you, not only do they dime your insulin through the roof, but that repeated up and down, that oscillation
Right.
makes your metabolism tired. And that's part of, at least the idea they have, that's also causing these Parkinson's, the Alzheimer's, your brain on a cellular level is getting tired, and it just this crap forms in there, and it's hard to wipe out. And that accumulation of crap, in the most scientific way I could explain it,
The
is
tau
what
proteins.
the tau
Yeah.
proteins,
Yeah, that's one mechanism.
is what's causing all those neurodegenerative diseases. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, you make a good point. Something more to transition, add to that and then transition is when you're eating several meals throughout the day, right? You never give your body a break. You have these waves of insulin growth factor up and a little bit lower, insulin growth factor up and a little bit lower, right? But when you're actually fasted, you can have insulin-like growth factor really low, and then you can have periods of very high insulin-like growth factor, right? And that's sort of the difference. So you get sort of the benefit of the clearance of all these damaged cells and all these other stuff because insulin-like growth factor and mTOR are low, and then you get the enhanced benefits and potentially cognitive and neuroprotective effects of the increase in insulin-like growth factor, which is why this sort of longer wave as opposed to all these slightly little waves, right? Can help improve fat metabolism, carbohydrate sensitivity, and hunger. And the hormone that regulates hunger is leptin. So as leptin goes up, your appetite decreases. And leptin levels are more regulated or can be more regulated from a fast or extended period of prolonged fast, for example.
yeah,
So, and this sort of gets us into diabetes and weight loss. in terms of intermittent fasting, which we've kind of gone over a little bit. But let's define diabetes, because I feel like a lot of people don't really understand what diabetes is.
Yeah.
And there are two different types. We're going to talk about type 2 diabetes.
So yeah, the one that you. That's also called. Correct me if I'm wrong. That's the adult onset diabetes.
That's
Yeah.
correct. And juvenile diabetes is type 1 diabetes. So yeah, basically diabetes occurs when your blood glucose, also your blood sugar, is too high, right? And it's because you have an inconsistency with your insulin levels that are secreted from beta islet cells in, the liver, versus how many carbohydrates that you're taking in. So one way to combat diabetes is to obviously take in less carbohydrates and monitor your weight gain and loss. And like I said before, one of the best ways for me, at least, and some of my other clients, is to incorporate intermittent fasting so that you can be at a caloric restriction. Obviously, you have to find a balance of a good metabolism. You have to take in lots and lots of really good foods, you know, plenty of really good foods for you for an extended period to boost the metabolism. Make sure you're getting lots of sunlight, lots of water, and to boost the metabolism, and then slowly cut out food. And you can do that with an intermittent fasting approach by, delaying how long it is that you're eating for. And that's really all I want to say about diabetes and hunger and weight loss in regards to, it's really the style of the diet that allows for carbohydrate restriction, weight loss, and improved leptin levels, hunger, and stuff like that.
Yeah, it helps with your insulin. Intermittent fasting. A lot of the reviews Jess and I read.
Yeah.
We didn't want to touch too. Well, we want to discuss diabetes because it is a central component within the literature. But a fair amount of the studies that we read, they're small, so between 20 and 50 people, and there's a lot of, if your BMI is really high and you're diabetic versus pre-diabetic, or you're 25 years old and diabetic versus 50 plus diabetic, or there's a whole it's a whole minefield within the literature, because each person's body, and this comes down to sex, your genetic makeup, and will be a lot of those things will determine how your response to your diabetic condition will be going forward, and also your sensitivity to uh, uh, mediation by intermittent fasting. So yeah, and so if that's something you guys want to explore further, we can give you some references to read, but it gets pretty heady sometimes reading about that. But the idea behind, like Justin said, with intermittent fasting and diabetes is that it gives your body a break, and it gives your insulin, your blood glucose to eventually kind of settle itself down, and your body to say, okay, we're not constantly jacking up insulin. Just another small thing I want to get into. You all know my fascination with the gut microbiome. So Justin talked about having a wide, varied diet. This is something that will often come up in the diabetic intermittent fasting literature, and they'll say, we gave these people a certain diet, or we cut out one thing or another. But there's a growing understanding that the gut microbiome, as it regards to intermittent fasting, is that there's changes in the course of a day that will help just naturally regulate your insulin, or if you're putting lots of like not so nice things in there too, will help either flush it out, or can change the microbiome in the way that it can make have a toxifying effect. Yeah, so it's just something I want to talk about very, very briefly. So
Yeah, the gut microbiome literature is something we're going to have to take another episode to,
yeah, it's
to go
just
through.
it is maddening, and it's so damn interesting. I picked the wrong specialty, but anyway.
Yeah.
What else we got to get into? We did
Cancer and autoimmune disease.
Oh, there we go.
Is the So yeah, we've already talked a little bit about this, but basically, there's a mechanism by which damaged cells replicate, and that's when IGF-1 is increased in the body, which is from eating lots of carbohydrates and being at a caloric surplus. So this prevents autophagy, which is the clearing out of a lot of things we talked about, and cell death. Um, so, this is the reason, one of the mechanistic reasons behind cancer and autoimmune disease. And, you know, there isn't a lot of data on this. You mentioned Rhonda Patrick earlier. She's done a lot of studies regarding cancer
Hmm.
and, cancer risk biomarkers such as insulins, cytokines, and inflammation-based molecules, adiponectin and stuff like that, where she's done studies. And, people that are on excessive energy intakes on the development of growth of cancers in humans. So if you want to look up that stuff, and she talks about the proliferation of different cells and stuff like that based off of insulin sensitivities. She has a lot more information, but currently, basically what we'll say about it is there is some suggested evidence out there that intermittent fasting, whether it's from caloric restriction or not, does help with cancer, especially people that are getting chemotherapy. It can actually help preferentially clear out cancer cells versus healthy cells. So that's something to think about and talk with your doctor about if you're experiencing are currently going through cancer right now. And then autoimmune disease. So for people that don't know what an autoimmune disease is, it affects a lot of people, not only in the United States but in the world. It's basically a condition in which your immune system mistakenly attacks your body. Okay, so normally the immune system can tell the difference between foreign cells and your own cells, right? But in an autoimmune disease, the immune system mistakes part of your body, like your skin, your joints, as foreign. Okay, and the cells that are a part of the immune system are, lymphocytes, which are T cells, B cells, NK cells, neutrophils, and macrophages, and basically all these cells, are what regulate the symptoms of autoimmune diseases. Um, and studies have shown potential benefits for intermittent fasting on rheumatoid arthritis, fibromyalgia, and mixed connective tissue diseases like combination of lupus and things like that. And also MS, multiple sclerosis, is an autoimmune disease. And, when you fast for extended periods of time, your body has the chance to rest and recover, since it's not busy digesting food and defending against anti-inflammatory agents in food. And that state of rest can be especially helpful for taming autoimmunity, So this is sort of the idea behind why you might think about intermittent fasting if you have an autoimmune disease.
Yeah.
It helps initiate, clearing out a lot of the, damaged stuff. It reduces inflammation and pro-inflammatory cytokines. It can help improve, your immune and stress response. It's something to seriously think about if you have an autoimmune disease. And the one issue out there is a lot of people out there have celiac disease, and celiac disease is when you don't make a particular enzyme to digest gluten. I feel for these people because they cannot have donuts and all this other stuff.
Yep.
They have alternatives that are just not as good. And basically, I mean, that's the reality.
Taking your shots, dude.
Yeah, I'm taking shots right now, but I do feel bad for these people because, I mean, of course, there are autoimmune diseases that, my personal opinion, I feel are worse. Type 1 diabetes is one, for example, that has to be monitored a lot more closely. And there are apps out there if you have celiac disease where you can scan stuff, right? But basically, the problem with celiac is that people don't have a particular enzyme to digest gluten, so they can't have it. Right, they can develop a lot of inflammatory, chronic inflammation, not from training, which is actually a net positive for people that are trying to build muscle and recover, but a chronic inflammation, which can cause a variety of stomach cancers and stuff like that. So The problem with those people with celiac disease though, is that they actually don't absorb nutrients very well. Okay, so not only do they not absorb nutrients very well, but then you try them on a 24-hour fast and they're not absorbing anything. So they already have a tough time absorbing, and then they're not eating. So it's something to think about. Consult with your doctor about if you do have celiac disease and you want to try something new to prevent some of the symptoms. But that's really all I have on autoimmune disease, and I feel that there is a lot of information out there, to help the symptoms of autoimmunity.
Yeah, it's hard to
using fasting. So.
Yeah, it's hard to paint. It's much like the diabetes. It's hard to paint with a broad brush because each particular autoimmune disease is its own animal.
Exactly. Right. Yeah.
Jess, I think we've done a pretty. I'm looking over my notes now, see if we need to get like Nautilus status on anything else. But maybe let's hit some take home points for the listeners and say, if they want to try it. I know for my own, I've been experimenting the last couple of weeks with intermittent fasting. I'll be the first one to tell you I used to make fun of it. I'm like, you're just starving yourself. What the hell can it do? And man, it's been a challenge, but I'm doing something I saw in the literature. So we have 7 days in the week, that 2 days you're doing a longer fast. So my days are Tuesday and Thursday, and I've been trying to do between a 16 and 20-hour fast. And my little nugget I pulled from the literature said that even if you're doing just 2 days a week, you have I always mess this up. You have a better response to insulin than if you had not done that. So your body's taken its time to chill out. And so there's that. And then I also just wanted to cover that we're talking about intermittent fasting in the short term. There's a few different types of fasting. They have like a circadian rhythm. So ones where you eat when it's also kind of similarly styled to like a Ramadan style fast where you will eat before the sun comes up and then eat after the sun comes down. That generally falls within a 12 or 13 hour window where you're not eating. But they also have, the 16-8, so you're fasting for 16 hours, you're eating for 8. The 18-6, I think that we've gone over these before, you're fasting for 18 hours, or then the 20-4 where you're fasting for 20 hours. And each one of these has its own support in the literature for the whole metabolic processes that go along with each one of these. So those are my little nuggets I want to make sure and spit out to our listeners before we take off.
Right. Yeah, and this is not anybody's saving grace. I don't think you have to be disciplined, and it does help with a caloric restriction, which could be why all of these people are experiencing a lot of these benefits. But it has to be something you can adhere to, right? And we try to give the most flexibility possible when we work with people through Consistency Breeds Growth about what diet they follow. And we really get an idea of their lifestyle first to figure out what we think that they're able to do long-term and understand how to do long-term and eat intrinsically. And if that's intermittent fasting, that's great. And if it's not, that's okay too, right? It's really about what you can do long-term. But, obviously intermittent fasting is not as flexible as being able to eat all day. It puts a restriction on things. So, for me, I got used to it. It's fine. Jordan seems like he's getting used to it. So if you have questions, let us know. You can find us, at the _starving_podcast on Instagram. You can find us at consistencybreedsgrowth.com or CBG_online_sports on Instagram. I think we're out, man.
I think it's out. Another one in the bag. Write us, guys. We
Awesome.
like hearing from everybody.
Yep, absolutely. Talk to you soon. Later.
Bye.
Science.